I remember my son, I can't remember how old he was, but one day he said, "Mommy, tell them you're sorry."
She was a feisty young woman who might say the bold and the beautiful. She was not afraid.
But Unity Dow, also as a judge, was a very progressive judge.
My legacy is to challenge myself.
A welcome befitting a king. But in a patriarchal society like Botswana's, this woman's presence has not always been well received. Shunned by other women for standing up against the status quo, her quest for justice has rubbed some Batswana the wrong way. This is the story of Unity Dow. The story begins here in the sleepy town of Muchudi, some 48 kilometers from Gaborone, Botswana's capital city. It was 23rd April 1959. A second child was born to Moses and Ellen Diswai. They called her Unity.
Unity ra itumela thata ga re mo ga a tsholwa ga le bo gore na le ngwana a mosetsana ke seo ka ne re ntse re na le bana ba bangwe gape le ga gagwe re reng ga re mo neela leina le gore ke tshwaragano leina la gagwe re reela gore le bona ba tse maele mo leineng leo le ba rute sengwe bona bana ba re ba tsetse leina le le re Unity le ba rute sengwe gore le ra eng mo bophelong ba motho.
Unity's parents would go on to have 6 more children.
I grew up with a mother who's very, very strong, a dad who worked outside the home, and a mother who did not assign chores on the basis of gender at all. My family shaped me very much. I mean, I didn't grow up thinking there was anything I could not do. I really did not grow up thinking, oh, I cannot do this because I'm a woman. You know, so another thing that helped me later to challenge the kind of stereotypes that are, you know, a reality for many women all over the world, not just in Africa.
Ra Unity o sala simolola hela a le motlana itshupa ga e le ngwana o bonolo e le ngwana o utlwang o na le botlhale thata go sekoleng o na rata go bala dibuka thata a sa le motlana go ne go gelwa metsi kgakala le kwa lapeng a rwarwa mo tlhogong mme Unity o ne a re ga a ya nokeng re bitsa go ya nokeng a ba tshotse buka.
Those trips to the waterhole, coupled with Unity's hard work and determination, served her well as she managed to secure a government scholarship to study at university. And so began a 758-kilometer bus ride to the University of Swaziland in Mbabane. In the 70s and 80s, conflict in southern Africa was the norm. Wars of liberation were being fought in Zimbabwe, Namibia, Mozambique, and Angola. These events would leave lasting impressions on an entire generation of Batswana, as thousands of political refugees from the conflict zones sought asylum in Botswana. Barolong Seboni was Unity's contemporary at university. A senior lecturer in English literature at the University of Botswana, Saboni would also proofread her novels as she made her foray into the literary world.
For those of us who grew up and were at school, at university at the time, these were fascinating times. Unity Dow was an age mate, went to university around the same time. And for me and for people like her and others, it was a period also of intellectual stimulation because we were highly conscientized by all these political events and wars of liberation going on around us.
After numerous bus and train rides, though, Unity transferred to the University of Edinburgh, Scotland, to finish her law degree, as was the norm at the time. But it was only after graduation that Unity Dow's remarkable career began. She landed a job at the Attorney General's chambers in Botswana. Between 1983 and 1986, she worked as a criminal prosecutor. 3 years was enough. She moved on to be partner at 2 law firms. Unity had started to exhibit a nomadic spirit that would define her whole life.
After 3 years of working for the Attorney General's chambers, only 3 years, I decided to start my own law firm. That's crazy. I mean, I hardly knew anything about how to manage anything. You know, I could go into court and argue a case. But after 3 years, can you manage anything? But that's what I did. And everybody was very, very nervous about that. You know, but I did it.
As Unity's career flourished, so did her family life. She met and married American Peace Corps volunteer Peter Nathan Dow. Unity already had a child, Cheshe, from a previous relationship. But with Peter came 2 more, Tumisang and Natasha. And it was their mixed parentage which first catapulted Unity Dow onto the front pages. In 1982, the government had passed the Citizenship Act. The new law prevented women like Unity who were married to non-Batswana from passing on citizenship to their offspring. Ntombi Seswelo, a women's rights activist, was a founding member of the NGO Emang Basadi, which loosely translates to Women Rise Up in the Setswana language.
This law now was going to say, if you are foreigners and you have a child in Botswana, you can no longer take citizenship. But more to the point for us, if you are a Botswana woman married to a foreigner, you couldn't, the law now wasn't going to permit you to pass your citizenship to your children.
Due to the ongoing conflicts and the thousands of refugees from neighboring countries entering Botswana, the law threatened far-reaching implications for many, as most of the refugees, along with Unity's children, would be rendered stateless. Thus, they could be potentially locked out of state welfare, healthcare, and education. Formed in 1986, Emang Basadi embarked on sensitizing Batswana about the Citizenship Act through town hall meetings. They also made their feelings known to a committee of parliament established to collect people's views. 1990 would prove a pivotal year for Unity Dow and her children, as the then 31-year-old lawyer moved to court to challenge the Citizenship Act.
That's when then we made a decision to approach a couple of people who were in the situation, that is Batswana women married by foreign men, to appeal to them, you know, if they could volunteer to stand and be the face of the organization. Some said, well, my husband is not comfortable with this. Remember, these were men who were guests of the government, some of them, the husbands. But there were 2 who came out, and Unity was one of them.
Referred henceforth as the citizenship case, Unity became the figurehead of the lawsuit.
So it wasn't just my issue. It wasn't just an issue of educated women marrying foreigners. It was an issue of, border people who intermarry with people across the border as well. It was very much an Emma Masadi issue at the time. But what to do with it in terms of a legal litigation was my idea. I mean, I guess as a lawyer, you begin to see the law as a tool for change, for social change. And I thought, okay, let's do this.
For then rookie journalist Mike Mutibi, the citizenship case had a lasting impression on his psyche. In a journalistic career that saw him work for some of the leading Batswana dailies like Megi, Mutibi was fascinated by people's reactions to the proceedings.
Botswana is a patriarchal society. It's a male-dominated, male-biased kind of a society. So some people were thinking that, what is this? What exactly is that issue here? Because culturally here, what happens is that a child takes after the father. It was about citizenship, children taking the citizenship of their father and not their mother. And this was kind of challenging that, which is what a lot of people were accustomed to. And what we are accustomed to, we were taking as something that is God-given, that has always been there. That is just tradition, that is our being, that is what defined us.
Billed as busybodies, influenced by Western cultures mainly due to their levels of education, most men viewed Unity Dow and the other women married to non-Batswana as seeking equality with men.
Like, I think the Unity Dow case was not so much about an individual. It wasn't so much about Unity Dow as it was about, the broader entrenchment of equality. It was a human rights case. Some people, of course, when it started, they looked at it as an individualistic case, as a case about one woman trying to proclaim the rights for her own children. But I think the case was much bigger than that. It was about civil liberties, it was about equality, it was about human rights.
While the country was deeply engrossed with events at the High Court, Unity's parents were worried.
mme go na ga ka ska ga mathata mme ha sa tsa a batla go sekisa goromente o na ampolela gore ke tlo go sekisa goromente a gago ka gore ke sa ke tloga ke le modomgraga antare ke tlo go sekisa goromente a gago because ka gore ga nna ga mpitse ke le ngwana wa lehatshile bo khedile ke wena bona bana hatsi mme ke tlo ba sekisa ke na ka nna le letswalo thata la gore a mme goromente wa tla sekisiwa ka one ntse ke utlwa mo mahatsheng a mangwe go te gore batho ba kgona ga ba bua sekise goromente ba ka bolaiwa ba ka reng ke ipotsa dipotso gore a mme ngwana ke ene o helela goromente a dirile jang ka ene.
She was a feisty young woman who, you might say, the bold and the beautiful. She was not afraid. She faced this and was determined. I mean, it was quite, haranguing, but we were there every time the case was on. But she did it with that passion to set things right.
Women turned against me. Some women turned against me. I was trying to upset Botswana culture. I was, it was amazing what was said. I remember my son, I can't remember how old he was, but one day he said, "Mommy, tell them you're sorry. Tell them you didn't mean it. I don't want to hear my name in the news anymore." That's how it was in every newspaper. For years I didn't read newspapers about myself. I still don't really. I don't read stuff about myself.
To make matters worse, the government of Botswana concurred that the Citizenship Act was in fact discriminatory. Government attorneys argued this was intentionally done so as to preserve the male orientation of Botswana society. After 5 years of legal wrangling, the presiding judge made his decision. Unity's aggressive nature and strong oratory skills impressed the magistrate. Due to the government's own admittance that the Citizenship Act was discriminatory, the judge ruled that the law was unconstitutional. Unity and Emang Basadi were victorious. The government appealed the decision, but lost again. It was the start of a new chapter in Unity's life and career.
It was a turning point because remember, by any stretch of imagination, and that would pertain to many countries, including in the Western world, when you tackle government in court, that was unheard of, you understand, and on an issue that encroached on how people perceive things culturally, religiously, and so on. It was a turning point.
For a few years, Unity disappeared from public view. But then in 1997 came a surprise phone call. The Chief Justice of Botswana was on the line. His request baffled Unity.
We called to say, look, if the president were to appoint you judge, would you accept, and this is the process. I thought he was crazy, joking. I'm female, and judges are male, and at that time, almost all the judges, but for two, were white males, okay? And all of them were old, at least old meaning at least 10 years older. The closest to me in age was 10 years older. So I did not fit the profile of a judge.
Due to the legal brilliance exhibited during the citizenship case, the then president of Botswana, Masire, thought that Unity, a woman and an indigenous Batswana, would be a perfect addition to the judiciary. In spite of the call coming from the highest office in the land, she decided to keep the president waiting. However, the president had a card up his sleeve.
The president, sent somebody to call my husband. My father says, look, the president just offered, your daughter a judgeship, and she's going to think about it. She's going to think about it? And then of course my dad calls me and says, what is this I hear that you're going to think about this? Well, I said, okay, I thought about it.
It was a triumphant moment. After years of fighting for justice, activist Unity Dow was now Judge Unity Dow.
Unity aba sekisa gorumente aba win a case. As no win a case, president wana kweo re Masire ama amohira ele judge. Unity kana kweo na le 36, 37 years old. Merra nara itumela. Ure na le senatla sa mosadi se tsona le Unity. Ebile le ene judge ya ntlha ya mosadi mo Botswana.
Just as she had with the citizenship case at the start of her career, Unity Dow was never afraid to take on the same government that she was serving. This was evident in 2002 when the first people of the Kalahari took the government of Botswana to court. They were fighting a government decision to forcibly evict and resettle them outside their ancestral lands in the central Kalahari Game Reserve. Access to the reserve was restricted for those that had relocated. But the Kua people had previously been granted rights to dwell on their land in perpetuity with the right to hunt and gather. In 2006, the court ruled in their favor.
The government's refusal to allow the applicants to re-enter the CKJ unless they are issued with permits unlawful and unconstitutional. The consequence of the applications of February to March 2002 was to deprive the applicants of possession of their land forcibly, wrongfully, and without their consent.
But Unity Dow also as a judge was a very progressive judge, in my opinion. I remember there was a case that pitted Botswana government against the Basara. We call them Basara, people call them Bushmen. I don't know if it's an appropriate term. But I think she came up with a judgment that said they have a right to stay where they were staying and to hunt in the game reserve. That was another human rights issue. You are talking about a marginalized community, a community that virtually had no voice. And the courts here, I suppose even everywhere, have to be able to stand up, for the people who are less privileged, who are marginalized, who are weak.
While reading her judgment, Unity Dow said she had ruled against the government because they had operated under what she termed as a confusing and unclear policy. These rulings further enforced Unity's reputation as a judge who stood up for justice. Landmark legal cases and a family somehow aren't enough for Unity Dow. She also finds time to write novels. She delved into the literary world while still a High Court judge.
When I felt like I wrote many reports that were more like, like law-based reports or that nobody was reading. I don't know anybody who sits under a shade somewhere nicely reading a report written by anybody. I don't care what the subject is. So I felt like maybe if I retold the same stories, but in a novel form, maybe I'll reach more people than the ones who were reading my report at that time.
To date, she has penned 5 novels that have received rave reviews. According to Amazon.com, the international online retailer, only a few copies of Unity's books are left. They address a variety of topics. Her first, Far and Beyond, was a 2001 release focusing on gender, HIV and AIDS, and violence against women. She also wrote about justice, her pet subject, in The Screaming of the Innocent in 2002. Unity nurtures her creativity here at Modipe Hill on the outskirts of Gaborone. Considered to be a sacred place by her Bakatla tribe, she finds the tranquility of the hill inspiring to write. She used the hill to get away from the pressures of being a high-profile judge.
I'm going to just go up this way to look for an easy place to climb. It anchors me. I was born at the bottom of another hill, and so for me, this brown is, it's very comfortable. And also knowing that this is part of my history, and knowing that I am partly what I am because of people who came before me, because we carry the DNA of our ancestors. But not only that, I think we carry their dreams as well, and their hopes, because hopes are handed down from generation to generation. They may not be always realized, but every generation gives the next one or the next set of children hope and dreams.
It was with this in mind that Judge Unity Dow resigned her post in 2009 to set up her own law firm, Dow & Associates. After 11 years of service, the High Court judge was ready to move on. Her resignation from the bench, though, did not reduce her standing in the international legal community. Unity would serve as a justice in a constitutional dispute court in Kenya. She was also elected as chairperson of the International Commission of Jurists, ICJ.
I think I'm a nomad at heart. I'm just always moving. I need to be challenged, intellectually challenged. Once that goes away, I need to move and do something. And sometimes I really think to myself, I said to my husband, I wish I could just sit down and just be happy with sitting down. Sometimes, because I feel like I'm always getting myself into these jams. But I guess that's not my nature. I cannot do anything forever. Forever, it's just too scary to even to contemplate.
So what would a woman who had taken the government to court and won do next? What would be the next page in her adventure? Atishia, Botswana. Unity was busy campaigning as she embarked on a political career, bidding to become Member of Parliament for her home district, Mochudi West. Unity ran on a Botswana Democratic Party ticket, BDP. BDP has been in power since the mineral-rich country attained self-rule in 1966.
Politicians here are kind of perceived to be a bit dishonest, if I may use that word. I mean, for lack of a better term, there are some people who go into office to make impact, but there are some people who go into politics for other reasons. Unity Dow as a judge was an interpreter of laws. Now as a politician, she probably wants to be the maker of those laws.
But her first foray into politics was not a success. Unity Dow polled second in her constituency. However, she was nominated as Special Elected Member of Parliament by Botswana's President Ian Khama. Unity was also appointed Minister of Education.
Will it spoil my legacy? What is my legacy? My legacy is to try to push and see how far can I go with this. And it's just one frontier for me. Well, when I left in the NGO world, that was exactly what was written. Log Raditloka wrote a blistering article about how we abandoned the women's movement and blah blah this. Then I became a judge, and then when I left, how I'm abandoning the judiciary and the voice of reason. I'd be a politician. When I leave, they'll say the same thing. How she's leaving, I cannot make them all happy. I cannot, so it feels right. It feels very, very right.
Unity's life story has come full circle. She is back where it all began 56 years ago. She left Mochudi as a shy 18-year-old, and now she is former High Court Judge Dr. Unity Dow. She is with her people, her family, and this time they hope that their famous daughter is here to stay.